Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated on Friday that peace talks with Russia required increased momentum, adding that he had instructed the newly appointed National Security and Defense Council Secretary Rustem Umerov to accelerate the negotiation process. Zelensky also mentioned on X that the implementation of agreements from the second Istanbul meeting was continuing, but that more progress was in fact needed. We're now joined by Dr. Noor Nirwandi, who's a security analyst and psychops expert. He joins us live from Malaysia. Dr. Nirwandi, thank you very much for joining us. Given the current geopolitical situation in regards to this conflict, what steps can Ukraine take at this point to generate momentum without compromising its principles on territorial integrity?
I think the most important thing that Ukraine needs to do now is to have more diplomatic dialogues with Russia, of course, with appointments of Umerov and some representation from Ukraine. This is vital for Ukraine to show that they have a very unique and dedicated and structured diplomatic effort with some help from the NATO, US to have some harsher elements of putting up to get Russia to agree with some terms and negotiation. But this is something subjective into the importance of the Ukraine leadership, particularly in looking into what are the expectations of the world to end the conflict. Because this is a prolonged conflict. We have not even seen any form of ceasefire. And even the Russians and Ukraine talks in Turkey in 2035, 2 meetings of them still looks very stagnant, and there's no elements of progressive talks in the ongoing conflict that have been, I think, around more than 3 years, and this is something disturbing. And it shows that the world needs some more elements of diplomatic capability and leadership by both parties, particularly on the Ukraine, to end the conflicts, and at least to have some restorations of the public's diplomatic confidence that the conflict will end soon.
Dr. Nirwandi, given that the US is the mediator in this conflict, and there has been some discourse about recognizing annexed Crimea, which was annexed in 2014 as Russian territory, how might these demands to legitimize these annexed regions, along with regions occupied during this conflict, be navigated or rejected in a new round of either direct talks or talks mediated by the United States?
I think this is something a little bit much more that we have. It's a little bit more complex because it involves NATO, US, and of course it involves the Ukraine's and the Russian conflict. So this is basically, we're looking into representative of NATO by Ukraine and the US, and of course we're talking about the blocks of Russia claiming its Article 51 and the Act of Self-Defense and the annexations of some representation province before they have shown that Russia will not bow down to any form of pressure. So this is what we call the last hurdle that Ukraine need to understand, because they are basically seeing into the blocks by the Russia to hold on to what they call as the last buffer in the context of NATO expansions in the region. So this is something that we have looked into more complexity. It's not about any form of annexation. It does not form holding on some form of territory. Basically, it look it back, it square back into the forms of ideological warfare. It talks about the post-Cold War periods, and of course, it talks about how Russia will see this an opportunity for them to seize and to make the buffer of the NATO expansions in the context of the geostrategics and geopolitics in the current situation are on their side. And Ukraine are basically have to look into a new form of determinations, whether they really want to go all out for the war or they really want to have a good diplomatic ceasefire and to bargain for any form of recommendations, any form of something that we call a little bit much more diplomatic effort to show that this is something that needs to be progressive as a whole context of the war.
Dr. Noor Nirwandi, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Pleasure to get your insight.